Please give a warm welcome to director Gavin O'Connor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back, Gavin, since you were here for Warrior. And speaking of Warrior, you navigate this relationship of brotherhood phenomenally. You did it in Warrior, and now you do it again in part 2 of The Accountant. You know, tell us about what is it about brothers that...
Well, Warrior was very personal. I wrote it, I co-wrote it, but it was very much based on my life in metaphorical ways. My parents split up when I was young. I went with my dad. My dad was an alcoholic, so there was a lot of personal things going on. For this one, much less personal, but also, you know, exploring a relationship with brothers, even though, you know, it's funny when I speak to people who have siblings, they say that there's a universal thing that happens. So even though you may not be on the spectrum or assassins or anything, just the emotional line between the two brothers, where they're both seeking love and connection, is just really relatable. So that's what when we were attempting to do the second movie and sort of architecturally start to build the script, I very much wanted to integrate Brax into the story, and I had no interest in just making an action movie. I would be bored to death. But the idea of exploring these brothers and they're trying to fix it with each other and come to some kind of an understanding, that was sort of the gasoline in the tank for me in the movie.
And you know, when I introduced the film, I mentioned what you just said, that this is an action film, but it's, you know, brains mixed with brawn, and in particular, I got emotional watching the last action sequence when the way you choreograph it and the way you direct it, we watch the connection between the two brothers. All of a sudden, they start working together. You know, tell us about delineating that.
Well, it was by design. You know, all Brax needed was an "I'm sorry," which is what happens in the Airstream when they're gearing. So
correct.
They're loading up with weapons and they're going to go to war. And Chris very simply just says, "I'm sorry." And I think I'm sure we can all relate to this. Like, there could be an absence of love for years in families, and if you just apologize and say "I'm sorry" from your heart, it can just all be eliminated, all those resentments and anger and things like that. So that's what I was going for in that scene, is that he just needed an "I'm sorry." And from there, now let's unite these two. Mm-hmm. And then it was about just tracking how they, like you're saying, how they work together. How do they accomplish this together? So when we were designing the action, which in a lot of ways, I mean, I wanted it to be grounded, but it's choreography. It's like dance, right?
Right.
You're doing it in steps. But inside of that, the conversations I was always having with Ben and John is, okay, how inside of that, what's happening here between the two of you? And let's keep tracking that as we get to the end of the third act. So we were very attentive to that.
You work again with Seamus McGarvey, your DP, and I love that in the first one, everything is, you know, the mise en scène, everything is contained visually, very precise. And then in this one, in particular in the action sequence, you insert chaos, control chaos. You know, tell us about that difference in the visual dynamic of both films.
Well, the first film, you know, I was always trying to look at how to, you know, the intention of camera is always, for me, always coming from where the characters are. And the first one was an origin story. And Chris, so with Christian, everything, all the, I very rarely, especially in the first 2 acts in the first movie, moved the camera. It was always a symmetry in how I framed him. And so that was obviously very intentional. And we started out that way in the second movie with Chris, but once we got into the plot, we just started to, once again, it was always analyzing where are we in the scene and, you know, what are we trying to say and what's the intention and how does the camera represent what the character's feeling. And it just became this organic thing of just tracking all that. And then it got a little complicated because then you have the two of them who are like so diametrically opposed. So it was trying to figure that out as well, which was at times challenging.
You do something that in other movies I would be critical of, but I love where you meander is the wrong word. The scene where they go dancing, or the scene where they're on top of the trailer talking. It's not scenes that are plot driven,
Exactly.
but give us so much heart and into the film. You know, tell us about those sequences.
Well, yeah, you're very astute. You're an astute film guy. So it starts with these movies are puzzle plots, and there's these Byzantine puzzle plots that are hard to understand. But if you don't need Chris, anybody can figure it out. So it has to be complex enough that only Chris can come in and do it. Otherwise, you don't need Chris. So there's that. Because of that, I just was like, I'm going to leave the plot of the movie every once in a while and just kind of go, let's just explore character. So the first time I do it was after Chris has a scene in Studio's Pizza Parlor with the fight scene, and then Chris in this pickup, and he says, I may know someone. And then I'm just like, you know what? And this is, you know, in designing the script with Bill, I said, you know, I just want to leave the plot of the movie. Let's go across the pond. Let's go meet Brax. He has nothing to do with the movie right now. And let's go hang out with Brax. So that was by design. And then we integrate Brax into the plot of the movie. And then when we get to the scene on the Airstream, it's sort of like everything's almost over in a way because Mary Beth has now exited the partnership. She's gone, and now we're just with the two brothers. And we start with Chris just to keep that ball in the air. I have Chris on the phone talking to Justine. It's like, let's just let Justine deal with that off screen. And let's just have these brothers start to examine their lives together. And really the central question for Brax is like, why is there such a distance, and why are you so disconnected from me? Is it because of your condition? So that's what he's trying to work towards. And then from there, we go to the dancing scene, and once again, I'm like, I just don't want to deal with the plot of the movie. I want to, as long as we're advancing their relationship, the brothers, and exploring that to me is, I think people don't go to, who goes to the movies for a plot? I've never gone to the movie for a plot. I go to the movies for the people that I'm connecting with on screen. So I just wanted to just go hang out with those guys and then accomplish several things. I wanted Chris to at least rub up against Love, right? And then when Bill and I were designing the scene, it was like, how do we do that? And actually, Bill was the one who said, I had kind of had all these criteria of what I wanted to happen, but I didn't know what the scene was. And Bill called me up one day. He said, line dancing. I said, wow. And he goes, it's mathematical. You start counting the steps. If Chris can do it, if he counts the steps, it's all math. There's a pattern. Yeah. Oh, we're pushing character now. That's great. Then he works up the courage to actually go up and dance with a girl. And Brax, who's going to think this is going to be the most humiliating experience of both of their lives, all of a sudden is now invested in his brother and is proud of his brother. And that's my brother up there. And so we're now lifting these two. And then at the end of the scene, it became, okay, so Chris had his fun. And then for Chris to be able to, in a generous way, offer something back to his brother was like, the only fun I know that my brother likes to have is to fight. So there was an opportunity here when this guy got in his face. So he said, so now Brax had, so it became a great night for the two of them.
And in the meantime, you picked the ugliest pair of shoes I've ever seen.
There's a story for that.
There is a story. Tell me the story.
So that's so funny you bring it. Ben is really good about, for whatever reason, he just lets me pick the clothes. So he just said, whatever you want me to wear. So in the first movie, I picked out all the suits, all the T-shirts. I'm like, this is what you're wearing here. And he's great. But he called me up. He goes, I know what I want Chris to wear as his uniform. Because I was already picking stuff out. He'd never done that. I'm like, all right. So I went up to his office one day, and he showed me the ideas, and we kind of picked, but this were his choices that he really liked. And then he showed me these shoes. They look like podiatrist orthopedic shoes or something. I mean, I was like, I had two emotions. At first, I cringed, and then I simultaneously had a flash in my head. I swear to you, of, oh, wait a minute! In the line dancing scene, there's going to be like a stampede of cowboy boots, ba-boom, ba-boom. And if I just track along the cow, and I land on those god awful shoes, that could be a great moment in the movie. So and then I was like, all right, great. And it was all coming from Ben from a place of comfort of what Chris would wear. And to be honest, like for me, when you get to the second movie, you really want your actors taking ownership of their characters.
Correct. Yeah.
So when Ben did that, I was really pleased because he was really taking, and he took so much more ownership in the second movie than he did on the first, because I think the gestation of all these years, and also Ben, without getting too personal, and I say this because he's brought it up, so I don't feel like I'm betraying him. He was in a relationship with someone for several years that he's not with anymore, but she had a son that was on the spectrum, so he was living with it every day, and he and the boy became very close. So there was a very deep understanding on a day-to-day basis that I think informed more for Ben in the second movie.
And while we're on the subject of clothes, explain to me the T-shirts. Those are like, I was trying to figure out what's the logic behind this crazy T-shirts.
Well, I don't like just, a lot of times costume people will just bring you T-shirts, just regular generic stuff, because anything with the design on it, you have to clear it all, and it's always a process with legal. But I really like those. But also, I just think Chris wears really odd T-shirts, and I was always trying to find something that, like, I don't know if you guys noticed when he's after the speed dating scene. When we see him back in his Airstream, he has a T-shirt that says, did anyone notice? Chick magnet, exactly. Chick magnet. He's so not a chick magnet. Clearly, we just witnessed him not being a chick magnet, but that's his dream. So I was always trying to find T-shirts that in some way, for little Easter eggs for people to recognize that were also in a way speaks to some of the themes of the movie.
Mm-hmm. How the film starts with the death of Ray King. Tell us about arriving to that killing him off. I mean, it's almost like a key to, because it becomes personal. Exactly. for Chris.
Exactly. When Bill and I were having the early conversations about just the design of the movie and what we wanted it to be about, we settled on a couple of things. The first was, sadly, and I had to let JK know this, which wasn't a fun conversation, but we're going to take Ray out for that exact reason. It becomes personal for Mary Beth, and it becomes personal for Christian, and that's sort of the key in the ignition of the story is who killed Ray and why. And because Ray, if that scene plays out, Ray solved everything. So now they have to catch up to what Ray solved. So that sort of like was a good sort of doorway into the mystery of the movie. So we decided on that. We decided on, I wanted to do more of a buddy picture, explore the brothers. Mm-hmm. And so that was the second one. And then the third was I wanted to build a plot around human trafficking. Now, this was back in 2018 when we started writing the script. And I wanted to build the plot around human trafficking just because, even back then, more so than now because it's everywhere in the news, but I wanted to shine a light on that. What what I didn't realize once we started building it was I knew I wanted to make my version of a popcorn movie. I never made like a popcorn movie before, but I wanted like my version of that. That's just a fun, entertaining film. And what I didn't really think about until I actually started shooting the movie was, man, this is a tricky tonal tightrope to deal with such heavy subject matter, and be honest about that, but also deal. You know, it's funny, you know, and fun, and to make sure that I didn't land on the wrong side of the tonal line.
Actually, expand on that, because I had that question, the fact that how the tonal shifts. You go from comedy, you mentioned buddy comedy, but it's a romance that happens between John and Ben. And then you have this badass action sequences, and then you segue into the human trafficking aspect.
Well, the thing I did with John and Ben was I never told them I wanted it to be funny. So they were never trying to be funny. So like we weren't right. Like it was always coming from character. And as long as everything was being generated by I mean, they're both maniacs in a lot of ways. I mean, John is way more dysfunctional than Christian, but Brax is. But you know, I remember when John said to me the first time he saw it, he goes, dude, I had no idea it was going to be that funny. Because he wasn't trying to be funny a lot of times. But I was also rolling. I also recognized, so my first day with them was the motel scene with the sex workers.
With the girls, yeah.
That was the first day with the two of them, which was the second week of shooting. And the first scene I shot was the two of them in the motel room, and I had a two-shot on them. It's when Brax starts making fun of him and repeating him. And I had them in a two-shot, and we planned on coverage. But when I finished, I said to Seamus, I'm like, we're not covering the scene. He said, what do you mean? I said, they did it all for me. They edited it, the rhythm, how they played the scene, and the way they played it would actually, I wouldn't even have had to edit that because they were doing it for me in regard to how they played the scene, the rhythm of it. And it also, I'm like, wow, there was something, this alchemy that was happening with them right out of the gate that I felt was sort of magical, just in regard to how there's like, actors can really like each other off screen. That doesn't mean it translates on screen where you're going to have this kind of molecular thing happen. But these guys, something happened, man. It became magical. They really just got into this groove with each other. And they really like each other, but they got into this groove. So I did a lot. I kept a lot of them just with the two of them in the frame a lot of times.
Yeah, but
cutting.
then going back about the tonal aspect, were you conscious about balancing, you know, the action, the drama, and then the comedy?
Yeah. So I did a lot of, once they took such ownership of their characters, we would play the scenes with the dialogue that was written, and then I would encourage them to improvise, and let's see what happens. So I would have, when I got to the cutting room and post, what I would do is I'd have the editor in where we'd be cutting, and then I had a second room where I had a second editor, and I would go through all the dailies, and I would just create bins for every scene. And I would just always, so I was always seeing how far I can push the comedy, because when in the bins, I would have something that's kind of funny, that's really funny, that's not even really that funny at all. And then it was really a balance of how much can I get away with, and I didn't know it. I was just building it based on my own taste and what I think is working, but I honestly didn't know it until I showed it to Ben first. He was the first person who saw the movie when I was ready to show it. And he called me up. He's like, he was so happy with it, and he couldn't believe, like, he was like, how did you get it to that place? So, like, it was my first cut. But I've been gestating with the movie so long, I knew like all the songs in the movie, I had all those songs picked out before I even prepped the film. Wow. I knew what I was going to use. Now, I didn't know if it was going to work. You don't know sometimes until you put it up against picture, but I knew the songs everywhere. But then when we put it up in front of an audience, we did our first test screening. And it played like gangbusters. Like, we scored a ridiculously high number. everyone from Amazon MGM were there. They were like, you can see it in the room. You know what's happening. They were all high-fiving each other and all that stuff. And I was like, all right, I guess it worked.
They were high-fiving each other instead of high-fiving you.
They're off in the corner, dude, looking at the scores. They're like, oh, this is good. And then they tell me, they're like, it was really high.
To me, the most beautiful scene is the one where they're up on the trailer, and that conversation. Was that scripted? Was that improvised?
That's the one scene. I don't think there's one line in there that's improvised. Maybe there's a couple, but no, that's pretty much. It's a beautiful scene. But he wrote a beautiful scene, and I have no
phone, throwing the phone.
So that was improvised. That was improvised. Throwing
Speaking of tonal shifts, kudos for the character of Anais. First time we see a Latina actress, a character that's so empowered. But what I find fascinating about the character is that she's not a villain. I mean, she is dangerous, but there's not.
Well, I think to know Anais is to know what happened to her, right? So now that you understand that she came to America, she had a dream, like so many people who come to this country, and then it became a dream shattered. Mm-hmm. So she's the villain in a way, or the femme fatale in a way, but she's also not once you realize what actually happened in her life and how she became the person that she is.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about choreographing the scene, the fight sequence. I mean, it's
with the girls?
With the two ladies,
yeah.
Yes. It's tricky because one of them it's not used to fighting, and then the other one is a killing machine. I love that sequence.
So initially, when when Bill sent me he finished a draft, which is very different from where we ended up. But in that draft, he had Christian and Anais fighting, and I said, I have no interest in watching Christian and Anais fight. Like that's like let's design this so it's Mary Beth and. So we did that, and then it was just a matter of coming from a place of what's Mary Beth's skills, which are limited. I mean, limited vis-a-vis what Anais's are, and I had these guys. We started in prep. We got all the choreography. I have the same guy since Warrior, Fernando Chen, who's my stunt guy, my stunt choreographer, and he's great because he's always coming from character. It's never just about disposable violence or something to look fucking cool. It's always coming from character, and we just started building it out from there. And then those guys had to do the work. They trained a lot just to be able to do that one scene through all the prep until we started shooting.
Tell us about working with Ben. What is remarkable about his performance is that he's never showing off. It could be a far showier, Rain Man performance. Instead, he goes for subtlety and quiet, subtle things.
It's remarkable because most actors would be so seduced by when you play someone who's genius or has mental health issues. It's usually it's an excuse to kind of show off, and Ben plays against that the whole time. So it's very restrained, and Ben is I think Ben is I think people are really starting to recognize he's such a good actor, and I don't know if he ever got as much credit as he's starting to get in regard to his talent as an actor, but he's really good. And my experience with him is because he's such a good director. But he, so when we did the first movie, his agent actually called me up and said, "What about Ben for the part?" Because I was just starting to cast it. It was you get the list and all that stuff, and he was shooting Batman. And I said, I never thought about Ben for it because he's always so busy directing and stuff. And they said, his agent pushed for it. Sent Ben the script on a Thursday. This is the first one on Monday. He and I were on the phone. But we had a great conversation. I told him what I was going to do with the script, and I was changing some things. And I said, you just need to know this is what I'm doing. And my last question to Ben was, I said, look, man, I love your movies. I think you're a really good director, but we can't have two directors on set, because I didn't know him yet. So I said, I just want to like put that on the table now so we don't have problems later. And he said, he goes, I started out as an actor, and I'm only going to be there as an actor, Gavin. And that's what he's been. But I think him being a director, why it makes him so great on a set is he understands the ecosystem so well of how to, just to make your fucking day. So he's there to help always. He just knows his lines. He's always on time. He's great to everybody on set, and he just fits right in. And he's a lifter.
Tell us about expanding Justine and the kids around Justine, which are all played by neurodivergent kids.
Yeah, so all the kids in the movie are either on the spectrum or neurodivergent. That was a decision. And then Justine is a new Justine. Yeah. Justine is a new Justine because we just were like, we're going to cast someone who's on the spectrum. So Allison is on the spectrum, and we shot with those kids. Our first week of shooting was all the kids and everything at Harvard Neuroscience, and I can't tell you how good they are at not acting. No acting. Mm. And when I met them all, I spent a couple of days with them. I got them on the set. And I said, you guys, let's just get comfortable here. You guys come down here all the time, so I want you guys to get comfortable in the space. I said, I'm going to teach you about what it's like to make movies so you understand the process, so nothing is foreign to you when we start shooting. So I spent, I think, 2 days with them. We just meet there, and I was walking them through technically what's going to happen. But also what I did with them was I said, what would you do? What would be on your desk? How would you do this? You tell me. And so they were educating me as much as I was educating them. And then the same with Justine, we had designed her room, but when we were doing it, because I hadn't had Justine cast yet, it was touch and go with a couple of different people. And but I said, please just leave it the way it is, because whoever's going to play Justine, I want her to come in and basically make it her own. Mm-hmm. So once I had Allison, I brought her up there day one. I said, what would you do with the room?
And then Anna Kendrick. We loved her in part one, but I understood, at first I was like, where's Anna Kendrick? But I understood the focus needed to be on the two brothers and their love affair, or exploration of their relationship. Tell us about not including, and hopefully she'll be back for the third.
Yeah. It was very intentional. If we had Anna, there was no way to service the storyline with the brothers, and that was just more important to me. But we've always, Bill and I and Lynette, our producer, have always wanted to do 3. And the idea was that the third movie, Christian will finally find love. I don't know what that's gonna look like and manifest itself, but he's gonna find love, and it probably should be Anna that he finds love with. Now, how do we do that? I don't know. Because to be totally honest with you guys, on the third movie I don't want to do another puzzle plot. I really don't. Like, I almost want to do like almost a plotless movie with a road picture with the brothers, and somehow we integrate Anna, and it's just like a road picture or something like that. So we'll see.
And you earlier brought up the intricate puzzle to the plot. And the follow-up and last question is like, tell us about incorporating that. I mean, it's in my head. I'm a smart guy, and watching this intricate plots are like, my head is exploding.
Join the club.
Is it for you like a MacGuffin that is just like, people ultimately won't care about the puzzle, will care more about the relationship?
So Friday night, I have a ritual, my wife and I, whenever I make a film, on the opening Friday night.
Which, by the way, it killed it at the box office this weekend.
You did well.
Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. So I sit in the back of the theater with a paying audience, because up until then, it's a film festival audience or a recruited audience. So I'm going to go pay, sit in the back, and watch the movie with a paying audience. And we did that. And it played great. And when it was over, the credits rolling and people start to leave, we just sat in the back. And when the lights came up, there was a kid, he was maybe 20 years old. He was sitting 2 seats away from us. Now, he has no idea who I am. And he goes, "Did you understand that?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well," and he starts asking me questions about the plot. And I start walking him through the minutia. He's like, "How did you know all that? You just saw the movie once and you were able to figure all that out? And you're even telling me like backstory stuff?" I'm like, "Well, I'm just making up the backstory stuff. I'm just thinking that's probably," and he had no idea. But my point was, I said, "Do you like the movie?" He goes, "No, I loved it. I just didn't understand certain things." But I don't know, like I can remember my daughter loved Marvel movies. I would go with her. I'm not a big Marvel guy. Sometimes I walk out of the movies, I don't know what the fuck that movie was about. I'll tell you what I do know. Apparently in Marvel movies, you can kill someone and then they can come back in another movie. And so then I'm like, what are the stakes if you can kill people and then come back? It doesn't, so there's no stakes in those movies. You just blow stuff. But people love the movies. Do they know the plots? I mean, I didn't understand half the plots. I hope you, I mean, I was so attentive to the plot in this movie. I hope you can understand it. But if you can't, I get it but I promise you it all connects. If you do a deep dive, it actually all makes sense. I promise you.
But is the heart of the movie that ultimately?
Yeah. I mean, once again, I don't think people go to the movies for a plot. I don't. I mean, look at a movie like The French Connection, right? I mean, think about that movie. That movie starts with Gene Hackman in a Santa suit, saying "pick your nose in Poughkeepsie" to some kid, and what's the plot of the movie? There's drugs. He's got to find the frog who's bringing drugs in from and after that, it's like you know nothing about his back. You're just on the train going with this guy. Tender Mercies, which is one of my favorite movies, I don't even think that has a plot. What's the plot of Tender Mercies? It's a hard movie to explain, but who doesn't love? I mean, you fall in love with the character, so. I hope that's what happens here. You connect with the characters, and it's relatable. And
in all of your films, and I'm so honored for you to be here. I love Warrior. I love Miracle. I love Tumbleweeds.
We did Warrior together up here, so yeah.
I love your films.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I love you. You're a great guy. Thanks for being here.
I thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I hope we do it again. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.